Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Answers Life. I hope everyone's doing great today. I am here at, I think it's called the Hendricks or Henderson Park here in Enterprise, Alabama. I'll put I'll put the name of the park in the description. I tried to look up the name of the park a second ago, but I don't have no internet access out here, so when I get home I'll put the name of the park where I'm at here in the description. So anyhow, I hope everyone's doing great today. Uh, I, I thought I would give you guys a view of another park, and of course, when I get done doing this video with you guys, I'm gonna cut the camera off and I'm gonna do a little bit of cardio here because I've been working out with the weights, but I need to start working out with the cardio because the cardio is gonna be a big game changer for me. Get my cardio, get my heart muscles up, and also just that's between watching my diet and doing cardio, that's going to be the game changer in terms of me losing weight. I'm aiming to lose at least 80 pounds. That's my goal. So anyways, this video is going to be about I'm going to do a comparison of living in a smaller town slash rural community versus living in a city. And when I mention living in a city, I'm primarily talking about smaller to mid-sized cities. I'm not really talking much about, not a lot of what I say about smaller and mid-sized cities. It can also apply to larger cities. But for those of you that have been watching me, you know I don't have any desire to live in a large major metro city. So as many of you guys might know, I've been up in Indiana looking at houses. Let me give you guys a view of where I'm at here. Yeah, I've been up in Indiana. Like last week, I was up looking at houses in Indiana. Well, that last week and in a couple of weeks prior to that, and because I'm because I was contemplating on leaving Alabama and moving back up to Indiana for several reasons that I'll explain on another video. Give you guys a view of the geese here. So anyways, now when I first started looking at houses, I was exclusively looking at houses only in small towns and in rural communities. And then I decided to expand my search to small cities, to smaller cities, and even a couple of mid-sized cities, but mainly smaller cities. Because although I do enjoy many aspects of living out in the country, of living in rural communities, such as houses that come with larger lots, neighbors that aren't as close into you, and just quieter and more peaceful communities. There's also certain aspects about the city life that I miss. Like, for one, I miss the, I miss the, I miss living in neighborhoods that are diverse. I'm not just talking racially. I'm also talking, and I'm also talking lifestyle. I'm talking ideas. And typically, whenever you live in a city, even some of your small cities, your communities are typically going to be more diverse versus living somewhere in the rural community. So I do miss that aspect of living in a city. I also miss the convenience of being closer to many of your basic amenities, such as groceries, places to take your vehicle, and you know, and entertainment. All right, give me 1 second, folks. I'm gonna walk by these people, and then I'll cut shit back on. Hope you enjoyed that little view. Anyways, as I was saying, there's certain aspects I miss about living in the city. And also another thing I miss about living in the city are is the fact that I'm a lot closer. I would be a lot closer to employment opportunities. Because a lot of times when you live further out in smaller towns and in rural communities, you tend to be further away from employment opportunities. I'll give you guys a little view here. So yeah, and like I told you guys, I'm out here, looking for a 9 to 5. I'm not going to just take anything, but I am looking. And when you live further out, finding that job to where the pay is livable and the work conditions are reasonable, and you're not working among a bunch of ignoramuses, it could be a challenge to find that type of a setup in a smaller community. As for if you're living in the city, it's a lot easier to, those type of opportunities are a lot easier to come by. So, with that being said, I began looking at houses in smaller and mid-sized cities. Now, there were a couple of houses that I found. Give you guys a quick view here. And here's the noisemaker right here. Well, it's the Johnny Henderson Family Park. That's what the name of the park is. Now you all know. I need to bring some bread here next time I come so I can feed these ducklings. But anyways, I looked at a couple of houses. In smaller and in mid-sized cities. In fact, I looked at several houses in the city, so to speak. And sadly, for my price range, which I'm not going to tell you exactly what my price range is, I would just say that the neighborhood, I would just say that my price range is lower than $200,000. I'll just leave it like that. So with that being said, when I was looking at houses within my price range, even at $150,000, I was driving through areas that were questionable. I saw houses for 120 grand. And remind you, I'm not talking about Florida. I'm not talking about anywhere out west. I'm talking about Indiana. And even at over 100 grand, I was still, a lot of those houses were in the hood. I'm going to say it straight like that. See, what they did was, they took see what's going on is, you got investors taking a bunch of houses that back in the day, like back in 2019, would have sold for no more than $25,000. And a lot of times they're buying up these houses for probably $10,000, slapping on a little bit of paint, doing some super small repairs, or patch ups, and then they're slapping on that $100,000+ price tag on these particular houses. I mean, houses that even today should sell for no more than, I would say, $45,000, $50,000, are selling for $100,000, $120,000. So I ran into a bunch of those situations. I also ran into a bunch of situations to where, I'll give you all a little view here. Okay, I had to quit recording for a second. There's too many people. But anyways, like I was saying a second ago, I ran into a bunch of situations to where many of these houses were in the hood. Now I know some of you, I'm hurting your feelings by calling your neighborhood the hood, but it is what it is. And I was looking in, and just to give you all a reference of what cities I was looking into, I was looking in Anderson, Muncie, Marion, Kokomo. And yes, I did look at, even though I swear up and down I would never live in a major city just for shits and giggles, I haven't looked into Fort Wayne. And there's a couple of other cities I've looked at that were small to mid-sized cities when it comes to housing up in Indiana. In fact, there was a couple of houses. No, this is one house that was located on the outskirts of Muncie. And this particular house was sitting on, I'm gonna turn you guys around here, give you guys a better view. So there's this particular house I was looking at that was sitting on a third of an acre. And they were asking $120,000 for this house on a third of an acre. The square footage of the house was about 1,200 square feet. So I got a little excited. So I said, okay, well, to be quite frank, I never really was a big Muncie fan. I've always preferred Anderson over Muncie, but you know what? I'm willing to give this house a look. So, I drove to the area. The house is there. And when I got there, I looked around and the neighborhood looked kind of ran down. The house itself looked like it was unkept. The yard wasn't even clipped. Yard looked like it ain't been cut in, I would say, a couple of 2 to 3 weeks. But at this point, I still had an open mind about everything. So, you know, 'cause so I get out my car, and right before I get a chance to walk the yard, as I normally do, that's the first thing I do before I go inside the house. Now, in this case, I was by myself. I didn't have my real estate agent, but I figure I can at least walk the yard. I can drive a few blocks and get a feel of the area. So, before I even had a chance to walk the yard, there's a neighbor across the street that happened to live in the area. We started talking. I asked him some questions, and you know, he pointed out a homeless encampment that happened to be in the backyard, not in his backyard, but in his. He has a neighbor behind him in their backyard. This individual had a homeless encampment set up. Now, the story of this individual was not the guy who I was talking to, but the story of the neighbor of this guy was, I guess, his mother gave him the house because she was frustrated because I guess he has issues with illegal substances. So the mother wanted nothing to do with the house. She wanted to just leave. I mean, I guess that's what the story is. So, making a long story short, this individual is living in this house with no running utilities. His lights were cut off, water cut off. And I would also assume that he most likely has not been paying his property taxes. So basically, he's living as a squatter in this particular property. And he has took it upon himself to invite a bunch of other people that are homeless, that are also tweakers, to camp out on his property in tents. So, yeah. The guy who I spoke to, who stopped me when I got out of my car, we talked for a few minutes, and then he showed me where this homeless encampment full of tweakers were at. I mean, his yard was full of tents and old busted down travel trailers and RVs. And then I asked him, well, did you call law enforcement on these people? And he said, yes, I called law enforcement. And when local law enforcement, I mean, I think what happened was he called law enforcement. Law enforcement did go out to the area, but they didn't do anything about the situation because their take on the situation was everyone needs a place to reside. And that was their take on the situation. Everyone needs a place to reside. So basically, absolutely nothing was done about the squatting situation that was going on next door to that man's house. And he said there are other people in the community that called law enforcement on these individuals. And again, absolutely nothing was done to solve the squatting situation because local law enforcement in Muncie, their take was everyone needs a place to stay. So nothing was done. And I understand every city is ran a little differently. Some cities are ran better than others. I get all that. But one trend that I tend to notice that pops up over and over in many of your cities, whether you're talking about a small city, a mid-sized city, or the metro, no matter what region of the country that you're referring to, whether it be the north, the south, east, west, even in larger cities and way up in the north, like in the Dakotas and also in Montana. Many of these cities over the years, and I don't mean to get too political here, but many of these cities over the years have adopted a liberal mindset of how to deal with situations like people coming into your community and squatting, for lack, in layman's terms. And I got to thinking, I looked at the house, I looked at the area, and after me and this individual had this conversation, after he showed me everything that was going on behind his house with the squatters slash the tweakers, because these squatters are not just people that are down on luck and homeless as a result. These people are tweakers. They out here, he even told me that these people do hard, they do hard illegal substances, and they walk around that neighborhood. Anything that's not tied down or locked down, they steal. I mean, these people have been known to go to vacant houses, and if the shingles are aluminum or whatever, they'll take it and they'll go to the closest scrap yard and try to get some money for it. I'm not sure what the rates are, but that's what they do. So I still decided to drive around a few blocks in the area just to see how the area was, and sure enough, all the tweakers slash the squatters slash criminals that this man was discussing with me, they were, they was outside in the front, doing what they do. And as I drove around the area, I saw another area where I saw tents, and I saw more people that looked like they were tweakers and slash squatters slash criminals. And then I got to thinking, okay, well, I'm not about to buy this house at all. And and like I told you before, all the other houses that I looked at, all of which were over $100,000, that were all in the city limits. Many of those, those houses, either A, those houses were in the hood, or B, if the area was half decent, the house was basically in tear down condition. It needed extensive repairs. So I'm thinking, you know what? Although I do appreciate certain aspects about living in the city, such as more diverse neighborhoods, closer to basic amenities, closer to employment opportunities, although I appreciate all that, I'm thinking, I consider myself to be a fairly even-tempered person, but some of the crap that goes on in many of your cities, where you got your tweakers squatting in vacant properties by you, they're defecating all over the place. They're cutting through your yard to get to the property where they're squatting. You leave anything out of any value, like if you got children, if they leave their bicycle out for 10 or 20 minutes while they go inside and do whatever they do inside the house, they might come outside and the bicycle's no longer there because your tweakers next door then stole their bike because they wanted to use the metal on that bike for scrap so they can get their money to support their illegal habit. So I'm thinking, if I left anything out, for whatever reason, rather it be unintentional or rather I left something out just for a hot second, and if anyone like that came and stole it, I would feel heavily violated. I mean, I'm not a violent person, and I consider myself an even-tempered person, but I don't know. If someone stole my stuff like that, I might be the type of person that might go confront them. And uh, and honestly, if I did, they wouldn't be the one that would be going to prison or jail. I would be the one going to prison or jail. Because my attitude is I work hard for my stuff. And to have some piece of, and to have some loser just walk on my property, turn you all around here, to have some loser walk on my property and steal my crap, I'm gonna feel some kind of way. I'm gonna want to seek revenge. And that revenge is gonna involve someone going to the ER. I'm just saying. So I got to thinking, it's like, you know what? I don't know if I can go back and live in the city again. I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could. Because, you know, and again, not to get too political, but some of the liberal policies that many of your cities have adopted over the years, I can't rock with that. As a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen, I can't rock with that. So, most likely, rather I stay here in Alabama, or I decide to move back up to Indiana, I'm going to stay living in rural communities. If it means having to drive over an hour each way to a job, it is what it is. I'd rather do that than to be somewhere in the city where I got to deal with bullshit. I'd rather be somewhere in a rural community where I can have a larger plot of land. I'm not so close in to my neighbors, and I don't have to worry so much about a bunch of tweakers / criminals squatting in houses that are in my community. I don't have to worry about coming back home from work or coming back home from a trip and finding half my crap gone because someone decided to break into my house, or they decided to break into my shed, or they decided to break into my vehicle and steal whatever because they're a bunch of losers and don't want to make an honest living. They rather steal and stay on illegal substance. So with that being said, I think for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be living in smaller towns or in rural communities, most likely an hour or even a little more than an hour from the city, from the metro. And I will point out, one thing which I dislike. One thing that I dislike about living in smaller towns and rural communities, and again, what I'm getting ready to say does not apply to every small town. It does not apply to every rural community, but it does apply to many of them, is the fact that sometimes I'm running into people that are very small-minded. They're not well-rounded at all. Sometimes I'll run into a community of people that if you didn't grow up in that area, if they weren't rocking with you since you was in grade school, then, if you go up to them and you try to start a conversation with them, they're going to shut you down right away. Or if they come to you and they try to start a conversation, their first question might be, "Are you from here?" The second you say no, that's the end of the conversation. Or a lot of times, you might get the evil stare like, "What the fuck you doing in this area? This ain't you. This ain't you. This ain't your community. You don't belong here." I mean, it's not going to be like the it's not going to be like it used to be back in the 60s, for an example, where people are going to come up to you and call you names. It's going to be more or less, you're going to, people are going to give you subliminal messages. And those subliminal messages are going those subliminal messages are going to be, you're not welcome here, you don't belong here, and they would love for you to pack up all your crap and move wherever just move somewhere else. And unfortunately, there's been many small communities throughout the United States that I've visited, and I have ran into those type of experiences. I'm not going to name any particular city, any particular town. I'm just talking in general. So when it comes to living in rural communities / small towns, I find, for me and many people who look like me, oftentimes have to be super vigilant and extra careful of where we choose to reside. Because if we decide, okay, this is a beautiful town, we're going to go, we're going to go ahead and buy a house here or buy some land and build here, have a homestead, whatever the case might be. It's like, yeah, as soon as you start doing your thing, that's when you start getting met with ill treatment. And in severe cases, if you have cattle or if you have plants, if your neighbor doesn't like you, they might do things to your cattle. They might do things to your plants to contaminate your food supply. So unfortunately, there's a lot of small and rural communities where people who look like me are simply not welcomed. So people who look like me have to be extra vigilant when we go to these small communities, when we go to a lot of these small communities, and make sure it's going to be the type of community where people are open-minded enough to welcome people like myself to that particular community. But then I got to thinking, would I rather deal with some of the small-mindedness and ignorance of people who live in small towns and small communities, or would I rather deal with some of the criminal elements that have unfortunately plagued many of your small and mid-sized cities? Because it used to be, like back in the day, a lot of the crime that you now hear happening in smaller and mid-sized cities only happen in larger metro areas. But as many people get priced out of larger metro areas, they're moving to small and mid-sized cities, and unfortunately, they're taking their criminal element with them. Their mentality is unfortunately making an appearance in many of your smaller and mid-sized cities. So the question I have to ask myself is, would I rather deal with some of the ignorance of some people who live in certain small towns and rural towns, or would I rather deal with the criminal element that's forever increasing, it seems, in many of your cities? And I'm thinking, you know what? Some of y'all might disagree with what I'm getting ready to say, but I honestly rather deal with some of the ignorance of certain people living in small towns. And again, I'm not talking about all small towns and rural communities, but there are many of them that are like that. And I rather, and given my choices, given how I live my life, given how I travel, and I'm gone for 2 weeks to even a month at a time. Like in some cases, I might be gone for half the year, kind of like I was when I was up in Indiana for those 5 months. I want to, I'd rather deal with the small town stuff and know that when I come back home, everything is going to be where I left it and how I left it. There's not going to be doors kicked in, windows busted out. There's not going to be people messing up my vehicles. If I leave something out, it's going to still be there whenever I go back to it and attend to it. So, yeah. Hopefully this video helped you guys out. For those of you that are undecisive of what type of lifestyle you want to live, hopefully this video did something for you. And when it comes to city living, I'm not saying that city living is necessarily bad. I will say if you're the type of person that you prefer to live in the city, it's going to take more money to live what I would consider a decent quality life in the city compared to what it would take to live in a smaller town or a rural community a little further out. And another thing about myself is I enjoy having large plots of land. And that's another thing that unless you got deep pockets, you're not going to get in the city. I don't really care to be super close to my next door neighbor. I don't really care for those areas where you look out the window and if their shades and blinds are up, you can see directly into their house. I don't care to be that close to my next door neighbor. And I don't care for many of the, what I call the more liberal policies when it comes to how many of your cities are choosing to deal with crime. So for my foreseeable future, I'm going to stay living in a small town. And I'll just drive the extra distance to the city to work. So, what would you guys do? I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Drop a comment below, let me know which direction you guys would take. And on that note, if you like what I do, you can give this video a thumbs up. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Sometimes YouTube unsubscribes people for whatever reason, so make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. For those of you that have already subscribed, on that note, stay blessed. Catch you all in the next one.